How to find your spiritual purpose. This title is not exactly accurate because I don't have the answer to how you find your spiritual purpose. I do have the answer as to where you look. And so that's what we're going to talk about. It's an interesting thing that the way we approach our relationship to God, to our spiritual nature and so forth. We take a little bit different path than I guess what you would call mainstream Christianity, although it's not that much different when you really look at what is being said on both sides. The idea is to get to know God. And we embrace the idea that is found in the Gospel of Luke, that kingdom doesn't come through observation. They'll neither say, lo, here it is, or lo, there. It's the kingdom of God is within you. And this is a difficult concept to grasp because we think we know ourselves pretty well. So how could this kingdom of God, which we would imagine is a pretty glorious thing, how could that be within us? And I was thinking about that this morning, how to give an illustration that might help, and I'm not sure this one will because this is a different climate that we live in here than where I grew up. In Missouri, in the Midwest, it was extremely humid there through the summer. It's humid all the time, but you really notice it in the summertime. 80-90% humidity. But what happens, the result of that is you'll see a lot of fog there. You'll see it in early in the morning, usually when you have a cool night, and fog, and it settles into the valleys and over ponds, lakes, bodies of water, rivers. And you can actually walk up to a pond when there's a heavy fog on it, and you won't be able to see the pond, but you see the fog. Or you won't be able to see the pond because of the fog. And I was thinking that's a lot like our inner quest, or inner search. And that fog, to me, represents, you know how when you close your eyes to be still, you get all this stuff spinning through your mind. It's a busyness of the mind and emotion, and you know you're all over the place. It's real difficult actually to focus. So in one way, that's the fog. That's it's a whole world that is basically of our creation and our sustaining. We sustain that through our thinking. But beneath that fog, there is this body of water, and it's quiet. You can't see it, you can't hear it unless there's a wave action, but on a pond there's not usually much. But it's there, and if you keep walking toward the pond, you'll eventually find out that it is there, and you'll find out in a way that's not real pleasant because you're walking to the water. But we would say, well, how could there be something here if I can't see it? I'm looking right at it and I can't see it. There's an obstruction. I have said that there are no natural obstacles between ourselves and God. And you could say the same thing in this illustration. There are no obstacles between yourself and that body of water, that pond. But there is a visual obstacle. And so we say that visual obstacle is reality. That's our reality. And that's the world we live in for the most part. It's this busyness of mind. And so we don't understand how a kingdom of God, or how a pond could be right in front of us and we couldn't see it. How could a kingdom of God, something so glorious as the kingdom of God, be within us and we can't see it? We don't know it's there. So what we do in our time of meditation is we acknowledge that there is this fog, there's thinking, this emotion that's going on all the time. But there is a reality beneath that maybe I've never consciously experienced. Maybe it's something I just have read about. Maybe I don't know that there is a thing that I can actually experience at this deeper level. And so we close our eyes and we look at the fog and we open ourselves to this idea that let's move beyond that. Let's let go. Let go of the busyness of the mind. It's not so important right now that I plan tonight's meal or write that letter or email, I should say, to do whatever it is that I'm thinking about. Maybe I can just let all of that go. Or maybe that loved one that's having a health challenge, I can just set them aside for now. Not because I don't love them, but because I'm putting more value on this experience that I'm wanting to have, and maybe I don't even know what that is, which makes it more difficult to stay with it. When you put your toe in the water, you know it's there, you know it's real. But until you do, it's a concept. And it's not an easy thing to pursue, and that's why we have to be persistent with understanding. When Jesus said, "My kingdom is not of this world," he's talking about the fog. That's what everybody sees. And that's what we're saying is real. That's the reality. We have to deal with that fog. But what that is a perception. It's a mental, emotional experience that I'm having all the time. And I'm calling that reality. He said there's a wide gate and there's a narrow gate. The wide gate is the world of the fog. It's the thinking, surface thinking that we are all engaged in. The narrow gate is this be still and know. This enter into this other realm that is beneath this surface appearance. And so that's what we're talking about today. And I have also, through the years, come to realize that even though you think perhaps you've never heard the voice of God or felt the presence of God as I'm speaking of it right now, I would say all of us have. We just don't call it that. We didn't know that's what it was. And what is that voice? How does it present itself to us? It presents itself to us as restlessness and dissatisfaction. That's the voice of God. And you'll say, that doesn't sound like the voice I want to hear. But you have never not heard it. It is spoken constantly. And back to our illustration, it would be a little like a wave noise if waves were caused in the pond and you would hear them but you couldn't see. It's like you feel that presence, that dissatisfaction, that restlessness. What is that? Why do I feel restless? Why do I feel like I haven't quite gotten something? There's something missing. And the answer to that is because your vision is still in the fog. You feel the presence of God. You know it's there because you are restless. And why are you restless? Because we are all living in a world that is much smaller than it's intended to be. We're not intended to live in the fog. We're intended to live in a world where there is no fog like here. Heaven is no humidity. So we're restless because our soul knows what it's like to not live in the fog. Our soul knows what it's like to be completely aware of God, our source. And so when we fall into a state of mind where we're unaware of that voice of God, that something pushing in through us is saying, there's more to you than you realize. There's much more to you. And that's the sense of restlessness. I'm trying to live in a world where I'm feeling incomplete. And yet my completeness is saying, you're not incomplete. You are whole. So how do we try to solve that restlessness? How do we try to solve that sense of incompleteness? We go out and try to get things from the world of the fog that'll make us feel like we're more than we are. And how successful are we at that? It just doesn't quite do it. So we come to the place in our life where we say, okay, I've tried that, and it doesn't really work. I've tried to close my eyes and be still, and that doesn't really work because I can't get past the fog. But that's the way that we have to stay with, because we are spiritual beings. We are that pond beneath the fog. And until we touch that reality, until we get to the point where we can allow that fog to lift, we will not live with our whole self. We will always feel inadequate, like we're lacking something that we have to fill from the outside. We have to draw something out of that fog to make us feel whole. And that's 99.9 probably % of the world. We're trying to attain happiness from outer things. But our kingdom is not of that world. Our kingdom is of the world that has no fog. And the amazing thing is that kingdom is always accessible. If you consider God is everywhere present equally at the same time, that means God is present where you are, as you. But if you're living in the fog, you won't see it. And I'm not saying that in a negative way. I'm saying that in a way that is very common among all of us. We're so used to living at the surface level of our thought, of our emotion, that we rarely drop down into that deeper level. Actually, if you go by a pond that's covered in fog and you get low enough down, usually there's about a foot of clear space between the fog level. It's sort of like flying in a plane, you know, when you fly up into the clouds, only it's on a smaller scale. There's a space there where there is no fog. And that's the way it is in us, and we have to, in quiet, pursue that, not aggressively, but passively, because we don't know what the pond looks like. We've forgotten. We know at a very deep level, the intuitive level, but we have forgotten what it is like to experience God, the pure bliss and joy of connecting with our spiritual source. And so we have to practice letting go. And that's what I have tried to emphasize for so long, is that spiritual progress is not made through adding more information in your brain, reading more books. Nothing wrong with doing that. But spiritual progress is made not by taking on more information, but by letting go of the information that we have. Make me an instrument, you know, the song, make me an instrument. It's like, I'm here, play me. I don't know how to play the music. I'm the instrument. But something does. And so it's a matter of letting go. And that's a very difficult concept for us Westerners to grasp. Because what is our whole educational system based on? It's based on putting information in, not drawing it out. And that, from my understanding, was the original idea of to educate means to draw out rather than to put in. And so we have it all backwards. And the intellect is extremely important. We don't want to diminish that in any way whatsoever. But when it comes to the spiritual experience, the intellect must take a back seat. Joseph's not part of the virgin birth. That's what that means. The intellect, Joseph. We put him aside. We don't need him. The virgin birth is this awareness that comes in stillness as we contemplate what lies beyond the fog. So we are turning to something Jesus said here to begin with, that if you don't think so much about Jesus the man as that spiritual core, that spiritual essence that you are, speaking these words, you did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you so that you might go bear fruit, fruit that will last. Our spiritual quest is not something we came up with, in other words. We didn't choose this path. This path chose us. We reach a point in our spiritual unfolding or awareness, in our life experience, where we realize there's much more to us than we have thought. I'm not just this intellect with emotions. There's something more to me. I'm a spiritual being inhabiting a physical body, having a human experience. And so much of my attention is focused on the maintenance of the body that I begin to think that's what I am. That's the fog. And so it's important to take time to not deny that, but to add to a greater awareness of that dimension that we call the soul, to become aware of it as a living thing rather than a concept. But that's the restlessness. That's the source of the restlessness. You did not choose me. I chose you. And you're in a fog, walking around in this fog and not happy, and I'm trying to show you why. But it's when you put it from that perspective, it's like that's why I feel like there's something missing. And what's missing is me. But you didn't choose this path. There's something pushing out through you that says you're more than you think. That's what chose you. That's what got your attention. But you may not have called it the voice of God. You called it something else. You just called it, I'm not happy. I'm not quite here. Something more that I need in life. So that's the source of it. Well, it seems that our first exposure to spiritual principles is through books and teachers. We first received an inner nudge that led to our academic quest. And to me, that's one of the most important things I've ever said, is when I discovered the first book that really opened my mind. What I thought about over the years and realized over the years is, why did that book open my mind? Why did I respond to that book? And what I've concluded is I responded to that one because it contained ideas that I had already accepted, but I hadn't said them, I hadn't articulated them. And that particular author said in writing what I already believed. And what that tells me is there's something in me that knows a lot more than I do. That something's me. It's my true essence. But I've been living at a surface level thinking I've got to go out and get my spirituality from a book. And I believed that for many years. But when you find a type of book that you respond to, a type of teacher that you respond to, and you pursue all the others that are just like them, pretty soon they all start saying the same thing. You've heard it before. So that you've reached your maximum in terms of intellectual understanding. Now, it's time to actually put your toe in the water. Because there's nothing more that any person can teach you. And many have not reached that point yet where they recognize that everything I pick up is, it's inspirational, it's good for a time, but I've heard it all before. I know it. So it's the same message. But what is this nudge? It is direct revelation seeping into our consciousness through our intuitive faculty. We desire more because we are more. And that more that we are, it doesn't shout from the clouds, "Here I am, look at me." It's an intuitive knowing. And that intuitive knowing, that greater self that we are, it doesn't have a voice like I have or you have, but it knows how to push. It knows how to expand. It knows how to make us feel uncomfortable where we are and start asking questions. You know, that's the whole scientific quest, is why are we not happy with the things we've discovered 100 years ago? What pushes us? We desire to know more in terms of that because more is there. We'll never discover the edge of outer space. We'll never discover the end of it. That's how it's made. That's how we're made. If I'm unhappy with myself, it's because what I'm unhappy with is the definition I've given to myself. Information I have accumulated over the years and said, this is me. And me is not too happy right now. And the reason me is not too happy right now is because I am saying you're more than you think me is. It sounds like a book. We're drawn to the literature that articulates that inner stirring for which we as yet have no words. When I first discovered this way of thinking, I couldn't explain it to anybody. I just knew I liked it. I was responding to it. I knew it was right. To me, it was right. And I tried to explain it to other people, and they didn't think it was right because I couldn't explain it. And I still couldn't explain it to those particular people because they have not reached a place in their life where that would make sense to them. They're still going to, they've adopted what they call religion as a set of beliefs that they have embraced. This is my faith. It's written down right here. You want to know what I believe? Here it is. But when you are trying to describe a spiritual experience, you can't put it into words. Again, it's like describing the taste of orange juice. You can write out the chemical compounds. You can make a nice big list of it, hand it to somebody. Here's what orange juice is. But you don't know what orange juice is till you take a swallow. It's sticking your toe in the water. The stirring is persistent and real. It is the truth of being surfacing in our conscious mind, pointing directly to our spiritual purpose. It will never leave you alone because it's what you are. And it's like we have put this fog over it, but it keeps asserting itself in a very gentle way. It's a still small voice, but it's not a voice. It's an inner feeling that there is something more. And when we say turn within to the presence of God, you know, what we need to do is get rid of the idea of God as this big old man in the sky. It's this energy that is our very being. And it communicates in silence, but it is very distinct. It's communicating all the time, but we want to have a pleasant conversation with it, not unhappiness and unrest, restlessness. And actually, that's a form of meditation if you will say, what is missing? Sit down quietly, say, what do I feel is missing? What's lacking here? And you follow that. You try to follow that feeling. That will lead you to that place of wholeness with practice. Because that's the source of it. Which comes first, the inspiration or the book? if the inspiration had not existed first, we would not have resonated with the book. Have you ever found a book that just lights your whole mind up, and you just know your brother, sister, whatever in-law will have the same experience? You give it to them and they never read it. Something happens, when you connect with an author that is saying something is true at a deep level. That's what's really going on, is you've opened a little bit of that, author's helped you open a little bit of that, cleared a little bit of that fog. They're not giving you something, they're reminding you of something you already know. When I first discovered Emily Cady, I couldn't get enough of what she had to say, and the time came when I wanted to know what made her say it. You see the difference? What made her say that? I want to know that. I want to know what made her say that. That's what I felt about the Fillmores as well. Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, the co-founders of the Unity Movement. I wanted to know what they had to say, but I wanted to know more later on what made them say it. I want to know what Jesus had to say, but I want to know more what made him say it. What made him do what he did? The things I do, you can do also, and greater things. There's a real message there. He's saying you and I are alike. We share a common source, our Father. So he's talking about something we have access to. But religion, in many ways, has become a kind of fog. Let's look at the fog. And let's think about God. But Jesus is saying, drop beneath the fog. The kingdom of God is within you. So the same book will mean nothing to one who is not moved by the inner prompting of spirit. The book that turned you on will do nothing for somebody else if they're not ready for it. So we do not initiate our spiritual quest, we respond to the prompting. You love that book or those books because of what you've already discovered in yourself. And I think that level of ownership is very important, spiritual ownership.
You've been watching a talk given by Reverend Doug Bottorff here at Independent Unity in beautiful Grand Junction, Colorado. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. It really helps us spread our message. If you would like to support us, you can do so by clicking the button in the right-hand corner of the video screen. We greatly appreciate your support. Thanks again for watching.